Microphone check, microphone check.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Policy Panel. I'm Councillor Jocelyn Law. I'm the chair of the Policy Panel and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. To begin the meeting, there are some matters of housekeeping. There are no practice evacuations planned for this evening. So if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall on St Runwald Street. The meeting is being audio recorded and live broadcast over the council's website and will also be available to listen to afterwards. Please could speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphones. This activates the audio recording and is also required for those using the hearing loop system. Please speak from a position close to the microphone. Members of the panel are able to use devices to access the agenda and reports and may view and participate in social media. And visitors are also welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please turn these items to silent. And do not use voice or camera flash functions. We may have a break at 8 o'clock this evening, subject to items on the agenda remaining. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. And I'd now like to ask members of the panel and staff present to introduce themselves. And I'll start going around on my left-hand side and work round, please.
Good evening, I'm Rosa Tanfield, the Head of Neighbourhood Services, and tonight I'm also the Executive Lead Officer for this panel.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to the panel.
Good evening, Councillor Sam McCarthy, representing Shrub End Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Julie Young, representing Greenstead Ward. Good evening, Councillor Sue Lissymore, representing Prettygate Ward.
Councillor Kevin Bentley from March 10 Lair Ward.
Councillor Rhys Smithson from Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Leslie Scott-Butell, Stanmore Ward.
Hello.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, and I'm Councillor Jocelyn Law for Highwoods Ward. So moving on to item 2, substitutions, and there are no substitutions this evening. Item 3, urgent items, and there are no urgent items scheduled for this meeting. Item 4, declarations of interest. And do any councillors present have any declarations of interest to make? I know we have a very light agenda, but if you do, please make them known. Moving on then to item 5, minutes. So I'm asking panel members to approve the minutes of the meetings that took place on 1st March 2023 and 24th May 2023 as a correct record. Does anyone wish to raise anything, or can we agree the minutes?
May I just suggest we do it separately, because I wasn't at one of the meetings but was at the other, so if you don't mind.
Noted, okay. So taking separately the minutes of 1st March 2023, does anyone wish to raise anything? No? Okay, thank you. And then moving to minutes for 24th, sorry, have any members got any points in relation to the meeting on the 24th of May? Councillor Smithson.
I wasn't present at the meeting on the 24th, but it says I was.
Thank you. Can that be noted, please?
Yes, Chairman.
Chair, happy to propose adoption of the minutes for the 24th of May meeting.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Are we all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed?
Agreed?
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to item 6, have your say. I don't believe we've got any items here, any speakers for this item today. So in that case, can we move directly then to item 7, which is the work plan? And could I ask Owen Haskell to introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is an opportunity for the panel members to raise any items which they wish to put forward as recommendations to Cabinet for adoption onto the panel's work programme for the coming municipal year. As you see, the current work programme only has one item scheduled, which is the annual update on financial inequality and the council's efforts to minimise that, and that's scheduled for September. So really, it's for the panel now to raise any items that they'd wish to have added to the work programme and discuss amongst yourselves those items that are raised.
Thank you very much. Could I invite panel members, please, to bring forward items they'd like to see on the work plan this year, please? Councillor Scott Butel.
Thank you. There were some items on last year's agenda which we require updates on and to take forward. For example, the green and blue, or the waters, parks and whatever it's called now. And I was the one who insisted on giving it another name. So that would be useful to have updates and schedule that in. We were looking at champions, but I think events have overtaken this, but it would be useful for the panel to have an update as to where we are with that. And just throwing it out there, I was thinking about this. We've had no updates and we haven't looked at the policy on equality and diversity. So that might be worth bringing back and having a look at that. If we've got time in the schedule for another new item.
Thank you very much. Councillor Young.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've had a bit of a think about it. I'm new to this panel, so I've been on it in the past, but not for a couple of years. I think it often comes up, I think, in Facebook groups that, while the master plan is very positive and there's a lot going on in terms of changing the way the town looks, our retail offer isn't actually getting any better. It's slowly declining. So that would be something I think would be worth looking at, how we can actually encourage more shops to come to Colchester, because if you look at towns of similar size, or actually many that are actually smaller than us, they seem to fare rather better than we do in terms of attracting names into the town. So I think that might be something we could focus on. The couple of other areas, it may well be prudent to start looking at our leisure and sport in the city. So just sort of mapping that and seeing what we have, what is actually making us money, what isn't making us money, and how that looks across the whole of the the city. And it'll be different in Mersey to how it is in Greenstone, for example, and what is on offer and how much we're charging and whether we can do better with that. I mean, I know Leisure World is our highest carbon emitter, for example, and what we're going to do about that in the future. And then the third thing is perhaps community facilities. We've got a really fantastic new centre at Stanway. We've got community centres throughout the city, and they do a fantastic job, especially in the rural communities where we've got parish halls and stuff. But it'd be interesting to map those resources and see, you know, what is working well and perhaps, you know, where there are some gaps. And I suppose, you know, start to focus again on perhaps, you know, what's it ever it's called, I can't remember what it was proposed to be called in High Woods, but it'd be good to have another look at that actually.
St Mark's.
St Mark's, that's the one. Just 3 ideas, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Lissamore.
Thank you. Going on further on different subjects, and as I say, I'm not sure whether these come within the remit of the panel, but I wonder perhaps if we could look at our future policy on parking, as in regards to income of car parks, because we're wanting people to, residents to use, you know, buses, walking, cycling more. But of course that will have a detrimental effect to our income from car parks. So it'd be quite good to see how we're going to plan that. And also, would it be sensible to have a look at the policy on grass cutting, which seems very appropriate at the moment, because I think we're all getting quite a lot of complaints. The balance between nature, cost cutting, fire risk. I think it would be good to have a broad look at the council's policy going forward on grass cutting.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those suggestions so far. I wonder if perhaps we might bring in Councillor Corey perhaps for some discussion at this point, as we haven't got any speakers from a panel. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Bentley. Sorry.
It's all right.
I will let you go.
No, well, that's very kind of you. And I should never really leap ahead of Councillor Corey at any time, but I just wanted. So a couple of points, and I have sat on the panel before, so I agree with what Councillor Scott Patel said on bringing some information back, and also it is worth always checking equality and diversity policies. In fact, it's always worth checking all policies. So perhaps we should have a standing item going through some of the policies, see if they need updating. Otherwise, we're always in danger of inventing new policies and not going back to see if we're actually carrying out what we said we would do, maybe even 10 years ago, and whether they need updating. I just want to look at the terms of reference, and through you, Chair, maybe ask the officers, are these set absolutely in tablets of stone and handed down to us, or are we in control of our own terms of reference? And the reason I ask that point is, and it hasn't changed since last year, so I was here, and I think I raised a similar question then, is the first point, I'm still not quite clear whether we are reviewing policies that the Cabinet allows us to review and comment on, or we can invent our own stuff, because I don't think that's quite clear enough. And if I've got that wrong, and we can, as we've just heard, put things on the agenda which are outside what the Cabinet may agree, I think that needs wording slightly better, because I don't think the average resident would pick that up and fully understand that. So that's the first point, but I'll ask that through the officers, if I may. In terms of ideas, I do think we should look at waste. I know that's being reviewed at the moment, and that's fine, because that needs to happen and go through the proper processes. But one of the questions I'd like to ask is, do we think just as one solitary local authority we are giving best value, and should we not be looking at shared services? Now, that may form part of what's going on with the review, and that's fine. But I wondered whether we could ask the Cabinet member to come here so we can assist the Cabinet member maybe with some policy thoughts around that. It's a he, isn't it? So he will be able to, it's in his purview to do what he wants to do, but as a collective, we could look at how that operates. And I certainly agree on the leisure facilities, particularly because with a rapidly growing population, which is good in many areas for having a rapidly growing population, it does bring issues around what facilities are available for people. Some are in the private sector, some are in the public sector, some are a combination of both, some are in the charity sector, if one looks at the Micah Centre in Mersey. So I think a proper audit of that and see where we could have a policy of how we are delivering equal services to the people of the entire city would be something worth doing. But on that first point, if I may have clarification, thank you.
Councillor Scott Patel.
Yeah, thank you. My understanding is communities do map what the facilities are across the city, so they would know, and also they will know what funding is coming in on the back of development. So it might be just ask them to put something together to present to us, so that we're up to date. Oh, and I like the grass cutting one.
Councillor Young.
I think the cabinet member, and I'm not sure that Mark is the appropriate cabinet member for this policy panel, but maybe all of them are. But maybe Mark could enlighten us over, you know, our terms of reference and what that relationship is with the cabinet in terms of our own destiny, whether we're allowed to determine our own destiny or whether it has to be in accordance with what the cabinet want us to be looking at.
Councillor Corey.
Thank you. Good evening, panel. Thank you, Chair. And I will try and address that point that Julie has made and Kevin as well. So I'll start there and then I'll happily comment on some of those other good ideas. So for me, my understanding is that both the Cabinet can ask this policy panel to look into policies and to develop policies, but also that the panel can put forward to Cabinet policies that it wants to develop and look into itself. I believe there is that kind of that pressure valve that Cabinet will look at and either approve or not, whether it goes forward based on resourcing. So whether or not we can fully resource or whether we believe it's within our remit at this time to be able to develop a policy that's completely new or comes completely from the panel or the public. So I think in a sense, you can originate your own policies, but we will check that we have the resource and we'll give you an honest response as to what resources could be put into it. So both this panel and Cabinet can generate your work programme agenda, I would say. And so just to move on to a couple of the items brought up so far, the green and blue infrastructure strategy, I believe that is going to be coming back, but actually possibly through the local plan committee might be most appropriate. But I think Rosa this evening could update on that if possible as a lead officer. But I think it definitely is going to be coming back to a panel to be talked over further. The equality and diversity point, I think, is a really good one. And I think it's, as Leslie and Kevin have both alluded to, these items that can come to panel because a policy does need updating. So I think that it would be useful to bring policies that need updating. I don't think it will be a regular stream because some are set for 5 or 10 years or 3 years, but there are often policies that fall under that remit, and I'll mention a couple later. But I do think equality and diversity, that's across how we outwardly are as a council, how internally we are with staff, but internally with members as well. I still think there's room for work, in particular, having more diverse councillors. Moving on from that, Julie Young, Julie, you said about the shops, etc. I think, again, that's a good idea, and working with a bid, they could come along and give you the view from the businesses. I would say that actually Colchester has a higher rate of shops in use compared to other towns and cities that have a vacancy rate of more shop fronts that are not occupied. So Colchester is above average for occupying its shops and its retail. So we are doing better than many others, but of course, looking for a diverse range of shops, we're always happy to do that. I think I remember Councillor Lissamore, Sue, probably about 15 years ago, talking about getting a Primark, and we ended up getting that in the end. And leisure and sports, I think that relates as well to the community assets point that you all have mentioned. I think that the communities team could definitely come to the panel and update on the asset-based community development programme and strategy that they have, and that I think we have mapped and audited our community infrastructure. But it's, I think Kevin raised the point, it's about the equality to access that. And I think there's a piece on that we could definitely look into. So it sounds like your work program is pretty full already. But I'd just come to parking. I think that, I'm not sure if that has gone to another panel already, but we'd have to ask officers on that one. Grants, ground maintenance, that is coming back, I think, to your panel. And again, Rosa may be able to update when that may be in the new year. And I think I've covered most things. Waste from Kevin. Waste is absolutely going to be under review. Again, have to go to Rosa and check whether or not we've programmed it to go to the Environment and Sustainability panel. It will definitely end up going through scrutiny as well. And just to reassure you, we are absolutely looking at every option now in terms of shared services, in terms of possibilities when it comes to that, because I think in this day and age, with council finances as they are, with our agenda towards reducing landfill and increasing recycling, we need to work with others or take ideas from others. So that definitely is an idea we'll be open to. Who ends up having it come back to them as a panel? It will be a fight between you and the Environment and Sustainability panel, I would suggest. I think I've covered as much as possible, but the general theme of updating policies, I think, is something you should have rolling on the agenda. And one of the policies that I know through my portfolio that will come to you is about procurement and how we do procurement, how we ensure social value, how we ensure good value for money. That will be something that we'll have to put into the diary in the autumn. And Sam Preston will bring that forward. And there's one other point as well that we were talking about is commemoration. And some people have brought up how we commemorate certain events. And we've actually developed a flag policy because so many people would come to us and ask which flags to raise above the town hall. And I think that could be linked in together as a similar policy. I will stop talking now because I hope I've answered the questions and also given you a few other ideas of what will be coming forward, either from Cabinet or that requires update because of policy updating. And I absolutely agree with the ethos that that's your role. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Corey. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, and thank you, Mark. I think that was a brilliant answer and covered every single point. And on the first point about the terms of reference, very clear direction. I think the sticking point then is the word terms of reference identified by Cabinet. That's I think we mean work with Cabinet or whatever the phrase. I think that just needs changing and tidying up.
Collaboratively, perhaps.
Whatever. I think identified means we're telling you, doesn't it? And I think that's not what Mark said. So I think we just need to ask officers just to tidy up the wording a bit. Otherwise, I think that covered it brilliantly. Thank you.
Councillor Smithson.
Thank you, Chair. Just taking a quick look, one policy does need to be reviewed by us in the next 12 months, which is the licensing food and health and safety policy. It expires in April 2024.
As no one else is speaking at the moment, I'd also like to maybe ask that we could perhaps have some updates on some items from the work programme from last year, perhaps. So not really substantive, but just sort of updates at meetings. I think it would be helpful to have an update on cost of living issues and perhaps have the team back, the benefits team back that came and presented last year, perhaps with an update on trends and what they've seen in the last year. And also, perhaps because we've still got the sort of year of celebration, commemoration going on with our new city status and the sort of perhaps linked to that tourism and leisure opportunities, it might be helpful to have an update on that. And I think, from discussions in our briefing the other day, Chair's briefing, we felt that it was perhaps fine to have quite a list of several items long to go to Cabinet, because we might be mindful that sometimes things change throughout the year and perhaps something will not become relevant and will drop off, and it's good to maybe have items in reserve that we might want to bring forward. Councillor Scott Patel.
Thank you, sorry, me again. Two quick things. I've been booted out of CMIS and I haven't got the password to get back in. So I'm sitting here with a blank screen. The other thing that might be worth looking at, and we did talk about it before, was we have no policy if something happens and we want to commemorate. We have nothing in place officially for COVID memorials or remembrance, and also there were noises made that people wanted to do something for the Queen. So it's something that could be looked at as to how we could go about that, how people could buy into that if that's what they wish to do.
Yeah, thank you. So I think so. If I've got that straight, that it would be a policy around sort of dealing with all aspects of commemoration and how we manage those.
Okay, thank you. So just on a couple of those points then, in terms of the green and blue infrastructure strategy, or any other name therein that describes what we were talking about, things have moved on since that was presented to the panel last year, and in effect planning on leading on a much broader green and blue infrastructure strategy that covers both developments as well as our own assets. And so the team are working with them on that, and they will be reporting through to the local plan committee rather than through this panel. What I'm going to do is just explore if there is an opportunity, however, for this panel to at least look at scope or understand the approach. So I will try and see if I can get that added for the next agenda item, subject to resources and what can be presented at that meeting. In terms of grounds maintenance, so this panel worked with myself and officers on the business plan to look at bringing grounds maintenance in-house in October 2026. And we agreed as a panel then that there will be an annual update. So the last one was in March of this year. So the plan was to provide an update again in March of the next calendar year. And that was specifically focusing on the transition of the contract and the preparations for bringing the service in-house. But I guess what I'm hearing is concerns with the current contract, and that's something that I will have to go away and have a look at and see and discuss with Cabinet what the scope of this panel would be in terms of looking at that. So again, if I can take that away, and I guess, again, that the panel will be keen on that coming to probably the next meeting just due to timing. So if I can take that away and have a look at that and confirm after the meeting. And then in terms of waste, the Environment and Sustainability Panel have on their forward programme developing the recycling and waste strategy for Essex. And as Councillor Corey said, that will then go through to scrutiny and final sign-off at Cabinet. So again, I'm not sure it would be appropriate for it to come here as well, because it would be duplication. And that strategy will look at, as Councillor Corey said, all the options and yeah, all of the elements of waste strategy going forward.
Councillor Smithson.
Sorry, Chair, I think Councillor Councillor Bentley wants
Got
to
it
make
in
a
wrong
point
order,
in
yeah,
relation
Councillor.
to Rosa.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank
Councillor
you.
Bentley.
My point, so as long as this is being covered, my point was around shared services, not how we collect the waste individually as a council. As long as they're looking at that and reducing costs, because 12 different collection systems is not the most efficient way to collect. It may be great in your street, but it's not great across the rest of the county. As long as that's being looked at, that's fine. That's the point I was making, as opposed to current strategies going forward. It's part of the, do I need to declare an interest? Because the Essex Waste Strategy, of course, comes under my remit elsewhere. I will anyway, you can put it down. I just think, as long as we're looking at we've done this waste since 1974, is still the most efficient way of doing it, conversation needs to take place. If that's happening there, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you. Councillor Smithson now.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be a little controversial for the first meeting of the municipal year. I think that we should perhaps think about a bigger project for the whole of the year. I think if we don't already have one, we should consider developing a policy on the allocation of funding and expenditure to wards, because it feels to me, sitting in a rural ward, there is a disproportionate amount of money spent in inner city wards comparative to the council tax that is received from those wards.
Councillor Scott-Bittell.
Yeah, if I can come back to Mr. Controversial. My understanding is a lot of the Section 106 that some of the more urban wards are getting are on the back of development, and it's to mitigate the impact of that development on the ward. So, you know, so if there isn't it's all tied up with legal agreements. Didn't we look at this or didn't we talk about this? There was planning, yes, thank you.
I'm not talking specifically 106, I'm talking expenditure generally. I don't believe the council has a policy on how funding is allocated across the wards in any way, shape or form. Perhaps we should.
Sorry, councillor Young.
I think we're in danger of getting into the debate here, Chair. I would say that it's a proposal that's been put by a member of the panel, and I think, it's for us to gather the ideas and actually let officers go away and look at how we actually move forward with those ideas. I mean, I could go into some answers around that because we have a strategic plan, don't we? And the budget meets those strategic plan objectives, but that's getting into the debate.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think we've covered that point quite roundly, so perhaps we can leave that and then decide later on whether that gets included in the items to go forward. So I wonder.
Yes. Councillor Smithson, you raised about the licensing food policy expiring. Can I ask? Sorry, Matt. Would that go to licensing committee? Doesn't. Okay, so we'll have to have a look at that one. Okay. Well, I have a proposal, if that's okay, Chair. So August, I can provide an update on green blue infrastructure and grounds maintenance performance, subject to agreeing the scope with Cabinet and portfolio holders. September, we have universal credit stroke financial inequalities is currently on the programme, but if I could I change it to cost of living and financial inequalities, within which we will address things like universal credit and also housing benefits as well, and that will give you a much broader picture. November, January and March, I haven't got something for that, but what I'm hearing from the panel is equality and diversity. Councillor Corey has mentioned procurement policy, the commemoration policy that captures what Councillor Scott-Bytel was talking about, as well as Councillor Corey, shops and kind of economic investment in the town centre, sports and leisure, which also leads on to communities and the asset-based community development element, and food licensing policy. If we can, as Councillor Corey said, go away, understand what the resources requirements are, when are the appropriate timings, I can then propose an outline timeline from there.
Councillor Lissamore.
Are we not going to move forward with parking policy? I mean, this is talking about general parking policy versus, public transport.
I'm not sure, would this be within the remit of policy panel?
I mean, this is about the council's policy, coming back, sorry, but about council's policy on how it is going to balance the wish to for people to use public transport and to cycle and to walk versus protecting the council's income in car parks.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think we have to be mindful that different people need different modes of transports for different times, but things aren't always versus, I'm completely mindful of accessibility. Some people might need vehicles, other people use other forms. So we need to be equitable, but obviously bear in mind finances. But Rosa, perhaps you might give a steer. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Corey.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back on 2 points, but Sue's point about parking, I think it's an interesting one. If we're not just looking at parking, we're looking at the interrelationship. I know that we have a parking strategy that gets updated fairly regularly, and we've got Richard Walker, who's a nationally renowned and awarded officer who is head of parking and could definitely come and speak to you about it. They've just had new members on the NET panel, and I know he's done a briefing for those new members. So I think he could definitely come along, and then you could be updated on the newish, I think it's at least a year into being the new strategy, and sort of push and pull with that. I think it's actually an interesting discussion to have, and to see where you think the balance should be. And just coming back to Councillor Bentley as well, Kevin, we just to reassure you, we absolutely are looking at shared services, not just on waste, we're looking across the board. So yes, it has to be done. And I think for many good reasons, it has to be done, and we're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Rosa, sorry, can I just clarify the items that you listed, were they a general? They weren't all for one particular?
The list of the other policies for review that the policy panel and Councillor Corey has suggested, I think would be best if I go away, speak to officers and the portfolio holders and just agree which meeting they would best sit, and ensure that there's a good spread as well for the panel. So as you say, we're not looking at all of them in one go.
Yeah. Also, I was going to say, yes, can you sort of remind me of the process, having been on a panel for 1 year, in terms of the work plan? So this will go to the cabinet, won't it? And we'll have sight of that for the agenda for next time. Yeah.
Yes, I can cover that. That's correct, Chairman. The recommendations put forward by the panel for items to add to the work programme will go to Cabinet for their sign-off, and as soon as they've signed it off, they'll come back and we'll confirm the scheduling. So once they are approved by Cabinet, it's the panel who gets to decide when it wishes those items to be seen on its work programme.
Great. So we get to choose our scheduling. Woo! Thank you, Councillor Scott-Patel.
This is just a memory nudge. Didn't we agree last year to do some work between us and the Environment and Sustainability panel? When was it we were looking at the blue and green strategy?
It was the workshop thing I did, but then this is now, I think it appears to be going to local plan.
Right, thank you.
So, but it would still be good, I think, I'm sure would other members of the panel agree that we have some oversight and some sort of like input into that. I think that's really helpful, isn't it? So any other items? Oh, Councillor Smithson.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last thought, idea for me. We've pretty much gone down all of the strategic themes and covered pretty much all of them, with the exception of the last one, heritage, culture and celebrating the city. And I just wonder whether it's worthwhile having a think about the assets of community value or something along those lines, because that does encompass all of the wards. I know we have a register, but I get the sense that there's more dropping off the register than there are coming on. So maybe that's something we ought to be looking at or pushing somewhere else to look at.
Sorry, do you mean in terms of investigating why items are moving off, or just to the trends, or?
Items drop off because they're time limited. There's a 5-year limit on those assets coming forward, but they seem to be dropping off the list and they don't seem to be being rebid for and coming back on. But I noticed things like the football stadium aren't on that list. I'm surprised to see that a major asset that we have an involvement in, like the football stadium, isn't on the asset of community value. So we should be looking at that, or somebody should be looking at that sort of thing to see what else do we need to put on that list? What should we be thinking about? For example, bits of Middlewick Ranges, if they're not being developed, they will become more important. We should really be trying to protect those in some way. So perhaps, I don't know, Rosa, or maybe that comes under environment. I'm not sure where it comes, but it hasn't been looked at for a while is what I can see.
Rosa, do you want to comment?
Yeah, so forgive me if I've misunderstood this, but are we talking about council assets or
Community assets.
Community assets? So I think we have talked a little bit about that this evening already, and my understanding to take away was around that mapping of community assets and identifying if there were any gaps. Have I misunderstood that?
Yeah, so assets of community value are slightly different to community assets like the community centres. These are big, important assets that would have a detrimental impact on the economy and the well-being of residents if they were to disappear. So for example, if someone were to come and buy the football stadium and redevelop it for housing, that would be an asset of community value that was lost. It's how the council protects things that are important for residents, kind of thing. So it's used a lot in inner city wards like London, where speculative developers try and buy football stadia and parks and things like that.
Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back to help Reece there, I think there's a few different ways of looking at this, and I understand he doesn't mean just community assets, which I think we are agreeing to look at. I think there absolutely are. I don't know why the stadium isn't on the list, but there are assets like that that we should be checking out. But I think it's on our asset register. But what I would say is the local plan committee do look at the register of buildings that are of community interest. And that's typically to give planning protection. They may be historic or they may be of great community value. So I know that it's at slightly more planning terms, those buildings can be put on the register and protected. And that is something the local plan committee can look at and can be nudged to update. But there is a slight difference in a sense that, are they of enough value to be on that kind of planning register, or are they a different value, which again, the stadium maybe falls between both, but is on our asset register as a council. So I hope that helps. It doesn't exactly answer, but just gives a bit more explanation as to what I know is looked at and where. Thank you.
I know I've got Councillor Scott Patel, but Councillor Smithson, did you want to respond to that at all, or does that help?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Just following on from what Mark was just saying. So I've just found there is a policy on the community right to bid on community assets that are about to be sold. It hasn't been looked at since 2013, so it's 10 years old now. So Mark's absolutely right. There are things that fall between the gaps, so we probably do need to refresh this. If it needs refreshing to it needs looking at, but certainly it's a combination of what I was saying and what Mark was saying. It's a bit of both.
So perhaps it could be one of those policies that we want to review then. Councillor Scott Patel, thank you for your patience.
It's fine. I think we're sort of like getting there, and the clarification I was going to ask for has been given.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Have we got any other points does anyone feel they need to discuss any of the items we've listed already, or have any additional points? Okay, thank you very much. Rosa, do you want to come in with any points at this point? Now we've sort of got our final shortlist, so to speak.
Would you find it helpful if I just go through the list again? Just
yes, I think that would be helpful. Yeah.
And just, I guess, get the panel to agree. So August, an update on green and blue infrastructure, or whatever the correct term is. We'll have to look at the minutes for that one, Owen. Grounds maintenance performance. And then for September, universal, no, ignore me. So for September, sorry, cost of living and financial inequalities. And then a list that's being proposed as a combination from Councillor Corey and from the panel itself for Cabinet to agree and for officers to explore resource support is equality and diversity, procurement, commemorations including benches, flags, statues, shops and the town centre in terms of economic draw and attraction, sports and leisure, community asset mapping and the asset-based community development approach, food licensing, parking policy update on the new strategy, and potentially the community right to bid on community assets as well.
I think that that seems, do we feel that that represents the entirety? Am I getting a sense that, yeah? If we're happy, I don't think we need to, there's nothing controversial that we need to take a vote on. I think are we all agreed that that's a substantive list? Agreed? That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much then for your time this evening and for all your input. So, Councillor Corey, is there anything you wish to add before we draw the meeting to a close?
No, not at all. Thank you. That's been a good session.
No, thank you very much for your input, and I think we look forward. I think I really enjoyed last year the, as I said earlier, the collaborative approach that we have with Cabinet. I think it's really also very useful that we can work across different committee areas as well. I think we can have a really valuable input, and we've got some very experienced, I'm not including myself in this, experienced members of, as a newbie, so experienced members of the council, and I think we will look forward to having, robust but productive discussions in the coming municipal year. Thank you very much, everybody, and let's draw the meeting to a close. Good evening.
Thank you.